Please welcome back Lee Hunter.
Yeah, woo! Hope everybody enjoyed lunch. Thank you, Choice and Tom, for everything. We do appreciate it. At this point in time, we're going to begin our ceremony for the 2019 Hunter Conference Award for Excellence and Inspiration. This award was created to acknowledge an industry leader who exemplifies citizenship, entrepreneurship, and leadership in everything they do, both in and out of the office. Before we get started, though, I do want to take a moment and talk about the one who created this award, had the idea for this award. That's Jay Schultz of Hotel Business. Jay was an advisory board member who, I guess 11 years ago now, since this is our 10th annual award, came up with the idea for this award. As an advisory board member, he enthusiastically agreed to head the committee to recognize the award winners. Unfortunately, Jay passed away in August of 18 of cancer, but I did want to take a minute and say, thank you, Jay, appreciate it. At this point, I'd like to welcome to the stage to introduce our award winner, CEO of Noble Investment Group, Mitch Shaw.
Good afternoon. On a warm August day in 1963, at a time when the dialogue in our country felt increasingly out of touch with the burning optimism of the American dream, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. from this very city and by these very doorsteps led a congregation to our nation's capital as a call to conversation and to action. That very week, not far from Dr. King's destination, Geraldine and Thomas Jeremiah Baltimore welcomed into this world their firstborn, Thomas Jr. Young Thomas would be born and raised in the segregated South to a family gripped by the very poverty that many from their community would share. While his father, a man of God and a highly respected minister, and his mother, the rock of their family, would never have a permanent home over their heads, they would ensure that they raised their children in a loving home, one where commitment to family, faith, hard work, and gratitude would define the Baltimore name. An upbringing unyielding to these values earned Tom the academic financial aid that provided him the opportunity to attend the University of Virginia. Though he awoke every day fearful of the fragility of his situation, he would strive to be highly intentional in establishing trusting relationships and intensively focused to effectuate positive outcomes for those that believed in him. Tom worked his way up the ranks as a staff auditor at PwC, at HMS Host, negotiating airport concession agreements, and it was a rising star in the Marriott organization when Hilton came calling. It was while Tom was at Hilton when board member Bob Johnson saw the charisma, enthusiasm, and boundless capacity in this young leader. Together in 2000, they founded RLJ Development, an organization that would become the gold standard for real estate private equity companies, culminating in their transformation into one of the most respected REITs in the lodging industry. In 2016, Tom became the founding chairman and CEO of Park Hotels and Resorts, a $6.5 billion organization and one of the largest public REITs ever to exist in our industry. With an unrelenting thirst to surround himself with the very best and brightest, Tom is also the lead independent director of Prudential Insurance and the chairman of the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts. But yet, every Sunday, you will find Tom in the office, homage to the day that his father gave to others. Tom built world-class teams at RLJ and Park, attracting leaders from all backgrounds, races, and gender. Leaders like Leslie Hale, the ambitious young professional Tom recruited and has mentored for nearly 15 years, that today serves as the CEO of RLJ, the first female chief executive of a lodging REIT. There is, however, no doubt that Tom's most remarkable accomplishment was convincing his beautiful bride, Hillary, that he was worth taking a chance on. Together, Tom and Hillary have raised two outstanding children, Thomas and Hannah, in a home filled with great joy, and where family, faith, hard work, and gratitude continue to define the Baltimore name. As a husband, father, friend, and mentor, Tom is undeniable proof that the American dream is not only alive and well, it lives and breathes in the very soul of this incredible industry. On that beautiful August afternoon in our nation's capital, the optimistic Dr. King shared a dream with all of us. He asserted that we can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of our highways and the hotels of our cities. You cannot help but wonder if Dr. King could have ever imagined that a child born that very week would one day lead an enterprise with more than 30,000 luxury hotel rooms located in the central business districts of major cities across our great country. That a man of color, a man of faith, and a man of such indelible integrity would rise out of the poverty of his situation and become an inspirational role model for an entire generation. A man that took heed of the fierce urgency of now. A man that leads a life that matters to so many. And a man that most certainly will forever be judged by the immense content of his character. It is indeed my great honor and privilege to introduce to you my mentor, my friend, my brother, Thomas J. Baltimore, Jr.
I asked Mitt not to make me I asked him not to. I didn't know what he was going to say, and I said, "Don't have me up here as a sap," knowing that those subject matters are always pretty emotional for me. First, I want to thank Choice as one of the sponsors of the luncheon. I want to thank the Hunter family, Bob, Lee, Teague, the incredible organization that they've built. They've been role models and leaders and an inspiration to all of us. So thank you. Thank you for this honor. Not sure that I'm worthy, but I certainly will do my best to honor it as I move forward. I also want to thank my dear friend Mitt, and I say to Mitt often that we're sort of brothers from different mothers. But the truth of the story is, if you go back 20 years ago, when I was at Hilton pre-Sarbanes-Oxley, and we were in the process of trying to launch RLJ, and the late Steve Bolenbach and Matt Hart allowed me to keep my day job and work nights and weekends to launch a business. Only in America would that be possible. Harder today, given, certainly given governance issues, but certainly possible then. We were bidding on 7 hotels that Hilton was selling as part of their Promise Hotel acquisition. They inherited about 15 hotels that they wanted to franchise and manage, but not own. Turns out that, Mitt and his young organization at the time, they were the cover bid. So I was competing against Mitt in that context. We laugh about it now, Mitt and I have both enjoyed incredible good fortune. We've done many transactions together over the years, and Mitt, I love you, I appreciate you, and thank you for that warm introduction. I was moved and was not expecting those comments, so I'm grateful for you. I also want to acknowledge my lovely bride, Hillary, and my daughter, Hannah, our 16-year-old, and she's beginning the college tour process, so hence the reason that they're here in Atlanta. I know they're looking at two things. They're saying, one, they don't believe all that's been said today. And then secondly, my daughter's already made the observation, Dad, we have nowhere in our home to put this picture, so I don't know where you're going to put it. I look at that and say that's only a face there that perhaps my late mother and my wife in my younger days could perhaps appreciate. But I would not be standing here if I didn't have this incredible partner in Hillary. I took a lot of risk, and she never doubted me. She never blinked. She never had any fear. I think having that kind of partner is so important in success. So I thank God for you, and I appreciate all that you've done. You're an extraordinary wife, great mother, and great partner. To my princess Hannah, I don't know what you're going to run. You run the house, but you're definitely going to run something one day. I have no doubt, and I know your brother is going to make us proud as well. I do want to say that by honoring me, you honor my late parents. You honor, I think, the beauty of this incredible industry that we find ourselves in is that my story is uniquely an American story, like so many of you in this room and so many others. It's the reason I love this business, and I have such passion for it, listening to those personal stories and how people have overcome and what they've done. So I don't think there's any industry better than the lodging and the hospitality industry and all the related fields. And I talk about, if you take Hilton and Marriott, and Choice and Hyatt and IHG, they're all fierce competitors, but there's a respect and affection that occurs. And think about Coke and Pepsi. You'll never see people sort of merge the same way we do in this industry. So love this industry. Thank you so much for the award, and I'm going to put this somewhere where at least I can look at it from time to time and say, I'm not sure my family will, but at least I will. I'll look at it. So thank you. Now, it's hard now because then they want me to sort of talk, and I've learned over the years to, what I want to do today is just talk a little bit about the journey of sort of where I am today and what we're doing, where the industry is, some observations, some thoughts for your consideration. I promise I won't keep you long. About 3 years ago, after 17 years at RLJ, and we had a magical ride. I think I am so proud of the fact that I had the original core group, 8 people who had been with me for 12 to 17 years and no turnover. That is a hard thing to achieve, and I think when you find men and women where you've got alignment of interest and you've got shared values and you're working your tails off together, and together we had I think a magical run. A private company, did 3 private equity funds, took it public, had a team of men and women that were prepared to take over. My dear friend Chris Nassetta calls me and says, Hilton's going to split now. We want you to run and to spin out the real estate company. It was the one thing that I really found too compelling to pass up. Literally, I took off. My last day was on a Friday, and I started on Hilton that following Monday. There's tremendous risk in that because I went from something that was comfortable to something that was uncomfortable, something that I was co-founder and led for so long, to going back into an office in a really an uncomfortable setting, but with the promise of an opportunity to maybe build another team and to build something exciting. And it's been an incredible journey now, 3 years. And, the argument as to why is really simple, not dissimilar to what what Marriott did with Host 25 years ago, plus or minus, and going capital light, which obviously the industry and investors want pure play companies, so no surprise there. You know, today we stand with 52 hotels, about $9 billion in enterprise value, and we're actually the 25th largest REIT. There are about 200 REITs when you look across all the asset types. And to build that and to do that, when you think about the fact that we started with nothing. We didn't have a name, we didn't have a board, we didn't have office space. I had a designated CFO, and to build all of that in 6 months and then to launch a company, it's been an incredible, incredible journey, and it's been a lot of fun as well. If you look at the lodging REIT landscape today, there are 15 companies plus or minus, many capable, talented men and women that run these companies. We happen to be the second largest today, and we've got bold and aggressive plans like many of our peers. So we respect them all, and we look forward to competing with them on a day-to-day basis as we seek to grow. We've had a really good run. We've exceeded expectations, and part of it's, again, having a team of men and women focused and disciplined, and you know, there's a whole bunch of accolades there, and sector-leading RevPAR growth there. Our returns have been significant, north of 37% since the IPO, and we've been fortunate to outperform many of our peers, and we've had a number of internal growth initiatives that we've been really focused on, and we've also been recycling capital and focused on ROI projects and spending time and trying to improve margins and grouping up this large portfolio. We thought those were really core initiatives for us. So it's been fun as we've been working through that process. We had a really nice print in 2018, and as you're building a team and to get early success and to have that team together, it's so important to have people aligned, have them focused, and have them moving in the right direction. And pleased to say that we're moving in that direction right now. And you know, I tell the team that we're judged every day as a public hotel REIT, and the first 2 years are good. We can't rest on our laurels. We've had strong performance, and that can change quickly if you underperform and you make bad decisions. I find in the REIT landscape, whether you're private equity or whether you're public, there are really sort of three guiding principles. And the first is really operational excellence, no different than the men and women in this room as you manage your own business. It's really important that you take care of the guest. You drive the top line, you get great flow through, you have the margins. I mean, all of those things are so important for us. Second is to be a prudent capital allocator, because we've got to distribute all of our capital, all of our profits through dividends, at least 90% to retain our REIT status. We choose to distribute 100%. Again, you've got to go back into the equity markets to continue raising capital for growth. So investors have to believe that you're a good capital allocator. And then the third, which is different in the REIT landscape than perhaps private equity and perhaps some of the high net worth families, is we can't really lever up. Having a low levered balance sheet becomes terribly important for our success. Investors prefer that we be low levered, given the volatility in the business. I do miss being able to lever up 70-75% as we could in the private equity days, but that's just one of the differences in that business model versus ours. We're all getting questions today about the economic cycle and where we are. My crystal ball is better than no one else's, but I do want to share some of my thoughts. And you know, we're in the 10th year of this cycle, and if you think historically, based on the research that I've done, trough to trough is about 11 years, trough to peak is about 7 years. The normal business cycle is really about 7 years, and we're in an elongated period, in part because obviously we had a relatively slow and modest recovery coming through certainly coming out of the Great Recession. But I think as a result of what we've seen with tax reform and deregulation, I really think there's more running room in this cycle. I know there's some who believe that perhaps there's going to be a recession this year or next year. I'm not one who believes that. There are some who also believe that, you know, we're in a secular bull market and we're midstream. We're in the 10th year of a 20-year run. Not sure I believe that either. But I do think that there's a few more years remaining in this cycle. Supply is beginning to peak. Demand continues to outpace. And the other thing which I found really interesting, if you look back, we've only had 6 recessions in the last 50 years, but we've only had 5 years of negative RevPAR. And of course, those aren't going to surprise anyone when you think about it. The S&L crisis of those years of negative RevPAR. Obviously 9/11, and then of course the Great Recession. So I think even if we have a recession, hopefully it's a relatively shallow or modest recession here as we move forward. I do think we're in a period where rates are going to be lower for longer, and that provides a really interesting backdrop for us. You're seeing that even today. The 10-year T, I think, was about 2.5%. None of us could have predicted given where it was, 6 months ago or even 8 months ago. And also when you look at the Fed now taking a more dovish view. Now they're doing that in part because some believe perhaps we're going to get a slowdown. I think GDP is still tracking to probably 2.5%. Probably next year keeping in that 2% range as well, which still can provide, I think, a real tailwind as we move forward in this cycle. I think there's some interesting indicators out there that are also really interesting, and one that we track pretty carefully is non-residential fixed investment spending. High correlation with RevPAR. It's 7% last year, decelerating slightly to about 4% this year. Unemployment rate, again, continued to remain underneath 4%. Inflation, obviously somewhat muted and tame. There's still slack on the labor market, certainly from an income, from a wage perspective. Corporate profits, again, that'll be the one I think that'll be really interesting to watch here over the next few quarters. And again, 4%, still, again, slight deceleration, but still positive. And then as we sort of look across all of the pundits, even the pundits are still saying sort of 2 to 2.5% sort of RevPAR growth. C Corps are 1 to 3%. REITs tend to be a little more aggressive than that. A lot of that will depend on your geographic makeup. If you've got huge distribution in San Francisco, given what's happened there, you've got a great tailwind as we look forward. We happen to be well positioned there, and in markets where there's limited supply growth, Hawaii, San Francisco, even Orlando. Obviously, there's so many hotel rooms in every brand. It's no demand and woman there. It's hard to add more supply. But even that, you're looking at the demand continues to grow in that market, among others. New York's an interesting market because it sort of missed this cycle, particularly given the 38%, 40% increase in supply. I wouldn't bet against New York long term. I think New York is going to be a strong performer as we move forward. The other thing is consumer confidence. Personal balance sheets are still solid and improving, and consumer confidence being at an 18-year high. I think that's a nice tailwind as well as we sort of move forward. So with that backdrop, I think we're solid for 19. I think 20 looks good. Some believe we might have a slight pullback in 21. We'll see. I think we'll see and have to watch that. Again, this also assumes we don't have any kind of geopolitical and also there's no trade war, but we'll have to see how those things unfold here over the next months and years. I found these little cartoons, which my team at Park helped me, and we thought these were interesting and appropriate. If you think about it, the Bears have been calling the top for some time. We're at the top. This is the top, and that chorus has been going on now for several years, and you see the bull there just sort of laughing, saying, yeah, just the Bears. Of course, they're way above, and I think, again, given that impression that conditions are still favorable in the market. And then the cartoon there on the right, I think, is even more telling. When you think about the bear with his head down and sighing, saying, yeah, it just keeps going and going. And I think there's some truth to that as we enter the 10th year of this cycle. And I think, again, this outlook is encouraging as we move forward. I am a big believer in brands. And part of that is given the fact that I worked for 3 of the Marriott companies. I worked for Hilton twice. And I do want to take a moment, and I think these are, some of the extraordinary men, giants in our industry, and brand champions. Can't have this discussion without looking at Conrad Hilton or Bill Marriott and looking at the incredible work that they've done, the Pritzker family. Personally, Steve Bolenbach, as I mentioned earlier, but sometimes people forget that Steve not only worked at Holiday Corp, and he worked for Trump at one time and bailed him out of issues early in his career, but Steve also was the CFO at Marriott, and he was the architect of the split. He then joined Hilton, and he was instrumental in the Promise acquisition, creating that brand segmentation. Also instrumental as part of that process in reuniting Hilton with Hilton International and creating that foundation. Steve passed last year, and I got the nicest note and follow-up phone call from him in my pursuit of Park and offering his assistance in anything that he could do. And I am of an indebted gratitude to Steve. And those of you that knew Steve knew he wasn't always the most dynamic speaker. He wasn't as always patient with us mortals, but he was an extraordinary man and very generous to the men and women that worked with him. John Gray and his extraordinary team at Blackstone, who we all know, in 2007 buying Hilton, and then what happened after that under Chris's. He had the foresight to, and I know Chris will be here tomorrow, and Chris is a true rock star and a real gentleman, but seeing the success that Chris and his extraordinary team at Hilton and what they've done. And then Arne Sorensen, obviously another giant in our industry. And people forget that Arne was a litigator. How often do you see a litigator then become CFO, president, and now CEO? So another extraordinary. And then, of course, Barry Sternlicht. And, Barry, obviously, the last year's honoree and another rock star. And interesting about the Heavenly Bed and what he did with W, and now with the One Hotel, and always been an innovator, and always been someone I think has really transformed. And I look at this list, and like all of you, I know that we want to celebrate. But I also stand here and tell you, my hope and my prayer is that we have a woman on that list soon enough. It's long overdue. And I'm hoping that we can continue to improve and push and make sure that we do better as an industry, particularly on the matters of gender diversity. So I share that, and I mean that sincerely. One of the things that I've done, this slide I've used for almost 20 years now. And my thesis has always been that brands matter. And many of the brands represented here today. Brand segmentation, global sales, worldwide reservation systems, the brand segmentation that we talk about, the RevPAR premiums as us as investors and managers and owners think about. It's interesting now when you think about Hilton and Marriott, I'll just isolate those because I know those stats. Marriott now with 120 million members in their loyalty program, Hilton with 85 million, and the opportunity that gets with big data and as we're moving forward in the industry and the importance of that. It's amazing now, 50 to 60% of that contribution coming obviously through those loyalty programs. The ability to be able to understand through engagement, through benchmarking, understanding brand preference becomes critically important as we look to the next generation in this beloved industry of ours. But I would also say, and I'm looking at my dear friend Bill Fortier right now as I say this, but unbridled growth is a risk. And I just say that it's something we've got. Brands like to plant flags, developers like to build hotels. Occasionally we get a recession. But I think the beauty of this industry, and I think we're at a really good balance today, and that is that the value proposition is dependent on a healthy owner community. We have to always maintain that balance. We've got great push and pull today, but collectively, I think it's something we've got to continue to manage as we move forward. And I have no complaints other than caution and observations as we move forward. I do have a couple comments I want to make, and I'd like to see a ceasefire of the arms race. I was on an NYU panel in 2006, and I made the comment as we were going to flat screen TVs, and we were at 27-inch or 32-inch, and then suddenly we were at 45, 50, 60, 70, and it never seems to end. I don't think the size of the TV drives customer preference. I've been saying it for a long time, and I'm not sure there's a difference much between 36 and 55. But I do think these are issues that we've got to be talking about. Linens are soft enough, in my humble opinion. And I think we've got to really begin thinking about technology and big data and how we can prune and understand those customer preferences, those behavior, how we engage as we move forward. And then communication. I think, again, we've got wonderful communication between the stakeholders today. We've got to continue to do that, and I think work incredibly hard on that. And if I have a pet peeve, and one thing that keeps me up late at night, it's really the need to drive down customer acquisition cost. I think that's the one area as an industry we've got to continue to work on. The OTAs were doing a better job, but I think we've got to continue to figure out ways to drive that direct relationship, and I do think those loyalty programs are going to be an incredibly important vehicle and tool available to us as we move forward. There are neat brands that I think are on the horizon. I think Graduate, Virgin Hotels, Viceroy, Ace Hotel, all of these, and there are others that are being incubated. But it's interesting as we think through. They appeal to travelers. There's an authenticity we can't ignore, and I think this will continue, and I think it's positive as we look at customer preferences and those needs as we move forward. So those can't be ignored, and those are threats to particularly those more dominant brands and those that have got the establishment. I think it's exciting. I think it's fresh. I think it's good. And Graduate's one in particular. I think it's a very clever, and I think about it and say, God, why didn't somebody think of that before? And I think it's a very interesting concept. It's just one to sort of point out. Industry disruptors. We all talk about this, and I've talked about technology and the sharing economy. I think we're making a lot of progress on getting a level playing field with Airbnb. I welcome the competition. I know that many of you share that. I just want a level playing field. Don't want illegal hotels, and I know that Chip Rogers and his team at American Hotel and Lodging Association and many of the men and women in this room are playing a role. We just got to make sure that we have that level playing field as we move forward. Sustainability becomes increasingly important. As a public company, we continue to get more and more inquiries from investors, from analysts, about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and these issues. It's not going away. The other side of that sustainability, we also have the sensitivity on the workforce. As we think about going green, well, what does it mean? Does it shorten their hours? Does it make us more efficient? Do we still have the opportunity to retrain those that may be displaced as part of that process? I think the same thing goes for technology. As we look at the front desk, that ultimately will be affected by it. There's no doubt about that. And I got to think at some point we're going to see AI and robotics affect our business more and more. So these are things that are all important as we all want to improve our margins, but there's also the other side of the equation that we've certainly got to be sensitive to. And lifestyle brands, we've talked about it. I don't think that's going to end. If anything, I think that's going to continue these brand extensions will continue as we move forward. What used to be, so a little fun slide that we put together, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I sure do miss those days we could charge for Wi-Fi. It was a pretty good little profit center there, and telephones, and revenues from in-room movies, and all those things look good, and I'm glad that same-day cancellation is largely gone. I'm glad to see that, and as we if we look at kind of what is today, free Wi-Fi is almost like water, so we know we've got to provide that, and we do have 48 to 72 hour cancellation. I think that's a good thing. we're one of the few industries that was sort of given a free option on our inventory. And I'm glad to see that we're making a lot of progress there. But, you know, the repricing software and this sort of transparency with pricing is a real issue, particularly given the fact that we've got so much data and so much information available. It's certainly something that we're going to have to watch as we move forward. And then you got to ask yourself, while I love these unique brands, how many brands are too many? You know, the market ultimately will speak, but as we all know, there's a cost to maintaining a brand from that standpoint. And what could be? You know, DoorDash. Do we use DoorDash for room service? Are the hotels going to partner with ride-sharing companies instead of maintaining shuttles? All of these things, I think, are going to be on the table as we move forward. And again, as we think about streaming, I know there's some application of it today, but I think that's only going to accelerate as we move forward here in the months and years ahead. You know, this is a fun slide for me. This is, as you think about it, we all sort of worry over the future of the industry and what's going to happen. And, you know, from my standpoint, we've survived home sharing, we've survived conference calls, we survived the jet age, right, where you can leave in the morning, get home to your families in the evening. We've survived video conferencing. We're surviving the OTAs. And global travel is only going to continue to accelerate. And I also think the need to meet, to collaborate in safe environments like this, where you can meet with men and women and conduct your business, is never going to go away. And again, I'm so grateful for the Hunter family and the Hunter team and all the incredible work that they're doing. I remember coming to this conference 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and to see how it's grown. But the need for this is terribly important, and that will never go away, and that's a fundamental core tenet of our business that makes our business so special and so exciting as we move forward. Industry challenges. These are things that aren't surprising any of you. What keeps me up late at night other than customer acquisition cost? It's rising labor costs, it's property taxes, it's insurance. None of those are surprising. Municipalities are challenged. They're trying to raise more income through those vehicles. Insurance, we're seeing it, particularly given the events that have occurred. Obviously, labor, and given the issues that we're all faced with, and rising minimum wage, I don't think, and a tight labor market. Those issues are gonna continue. Hopefully, with some of the changes that are being made, and we're getting a reset of that as we move forward. And this is another issue, and it's important, and it's important that we be talking about it as an industry, but it's the issue of getting more women, as I talked about earlier, in positions of management, on boards, active in our business. And Wells Fargo, Jeff Donnelly did a report and noted that those companies that had more women on their boards had outperformance, about 160 basis points of outperformance. And for some reason, lodging REITs were among the lowest. I've got two extraordinary women on my board at Park. And then McKinsey also came out with a study here, noticed that since 2015, there's been very little progress in improving women leadership representation. And again, I appeal to all of us. I challenge myself in every search we have to make sure that we've got a broad outreach. And I've had the privilege of working with so many talented women, many of whom weren't in our sector. Leslie Hale's an example of that. I mean, she was a Goldman banker and had worked at GE, had never been in lodging. But people can get up the learning curve pretty quickly if given that opportunity. But to see that we've only got 1 in 5 women in the C-suite and 1 in 25 in women of color, I encourage all of us to continue to do more in this area. And I think to the extent, what I always say in the boards and other companies that I'm involved in, if you have women leaders in your company, senior VPs, EVPs, in the C-suite, what happens is the impact that it has on your company, because women will want to join to say, she's there, she's a great role model, she's somebody that I can aspire to be. And I do think that this is terribly important, and those companies and those industries that get this, I think, are going to be far more successful over the long run. So something that I'm pushing my own company, and I encourage all of you as we move forward. Last and not least, and my dear friend Mitt really captured. For me, three things that I talk about with my own kids is faith. I find that faith grounds you, it centers you, and I have one of the many lessons and great benefits of my late father was a respect and appreciation for all religions, and it's something I try to live with in my own life every day. But this issue of preparation, I do still work 6 days a week is my rhythm. It's always been my rhythm. It's not going to change. I actually think my wife and kids kind of like it on Sundays. They sort of say to me sometimes, "What time are you going to the office?" My feelings aren't hurt anymore by that. But I find the phone's not ringing. I can think, I can reflect, I can prepare for the week. But for me, that preparation is still terribly important. And then perseverance. And in my humble opinion, perseverance is really the secret sauce of life. All of us. In every life, a little rain must fall. And in every life, unfortunately, even for good people, bad things will happen. And the ability to be able to press forward. And even my parents and my grandparents, all of whom were born and raised in Virginia in a very mean, difficult time, the beauty of them and their legacy more than anything else is they were never bitter. They were always optimistic. They were always encouraging. And I think it's important and I tell my own kids, you got to push forward. There are going to be those periods of difficulty, and you just got to fight through it. And guiding principles for me on the professional side, no man or woman succeeds alone. I say it all the time to my park team, and I also say that we've got to be prepared to take calculated risk. A lot of people thought I was crazy 3.5 years ago after 17 years of co-founding a company and leaving, but I knew that company was in good hands and that the men and women behind me were prepared to step up, and then I didn't want to live a life of regret, and I had this interesting opportunity, and I knew that portfolio, and I entered that process with energy and passion, and I haven't looked back. I also tell my kids all the time, you got to get out of your comfort zone. You grow in the dark places. You grow when you're in periods of discomfort, and I think that's an important lesson for all of us. And I also say to people, we all need a personal board of directors, but they should be men and women different than you. They should have different point of view to help you think through and evaluate opportunities. If they're all your friends and they look and feel and they're from the same circle, you're not really going to get, in my humble opinion, good feedback to be able to think out of the box and make that pivot for something that perhaps you should change. And then last for all of us, I stand here because I had so many mentors. Bill McCartan, who was now the chairman of Diamond Rock, a competitor company who I worked for 25 years ago. Bob Johnson, my longtime partner, and the late Steve Bolenbach. Bill Marriott. I still have notes that Bill Marriott sent me 25 years ago that I carry with me and keep in a special place, like so many other people. And so many people gave me a chance, and simply pay it forward. And I think it's something I know our industry does really well. And thank you guys for taking time. Thank you for honoring me and honoring my family as part of that, and also honoring my team at Park, because we're having fun and we're enjoying the journey. So thank all of you, and thanks again.